Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Sharon Kumara, a psychic medium and hypnotherapist specializing in past life therapy and repressed ET contact and abduction memories. She also has 2 near-death experiences of her own, and today we'll be talking about what she's learned from these experiences and how we can all help with humanity's ascension. Sharon, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Johnny. Pleasure to be here.
You have a very interesting background. When did you discover you had intuitive gifts? Was it when you were a kid or?
Yes, when I was a kid. And I think all children, we have these abilities. I just think that they're natural for us, especially as children. But as we become adults, we tend to push that aside and think we're making things up, or society doesn't help us with fostering our abilities and our connections and interconnection, psychic abilities. So yes, as a kid, I was, as they say, able to see dead people. And I had, prophetic visions and dreams and things like that. Being raised in a Catholic family, it wasn't something that we fostered or understood, and so it scared my parents whenever I would talk about it, which wasn't that often, because it scared me too. I didn't understand it because they didn't understand it.
People who are either mediums, psychic mediums, intuitives, empaths, when they report being able to see spirits, seeing dead people, as you just described, it's almost always when they're around 3 or 4 years old, but it never seems to be older than like 7. And after that, they report it just kind of goes away, and they're not really encouraged to go further into that. That was your experience also?
Yes. Actually, I was older when it started going away. I'm going to say about 9 or 10, if I remember correctly. And I don't remember a lot of my childhood because of my history. I don't recall having those same types of experiences after that because I was dealing with trauma at the time.
You had a visitation from your stepfather. I believe it was right after he passed. Tell us a little bit about that and how that might have had an impact on the path that you're on now.
Sure. It was in 1998 when he passed. I was aware of any of my abilities at that time. I must have been drinking and partying to repress it, and I just didn't have any idea or any interest in that type of thing. And so he passed that evening, and I'm resting on the sofa, and I see him, and his body was removed from the house. I'm at my mother's house, and I see him walking toward me. I'm in, I guess you could call alpha state, the light trance state. And my eyes are closed, and I see him through closed eyes walking toward me, actually. I realize that he's not looking at me. He's just walking or moving toward me, and I hear telepathically him saying or shouting out or yelling, "How the hell do I get out of here? Where's the door?" That type of thing. And that's my dad's, that's his sense of humor, and that's how he is. And he's looking beyond me, and then he walks through me and past me.
Interesting. So he was asking, how do I get out of here?
Yes.
He was still what you would call an earthbound spirit?
What I know now, which I didn't really know at the time, was that, yes, he was still hanging around the earth plane, maybe trying to understand what happened to him. He passed peacefully in his sleep, and he was in hospice at the time, and he died 30 days to the day of after he went on hospice. He had lung disease, so he was on oxygen too. And so he passed at home. So my mother and I were there with him. Now I know with my 2 near-death experiences that you still are you, and when you leave your body, and sometimes it can be a little confusing depending on what's going on with you and the attachments you have and the emotions that are going through your mind. So it didn't take him long. I'm thinking maybe 3 hours later or something like that, where he's like, okay, I understand now. How do I get out of here?
Interesting.
So I'm feeling that the door opened behind me, the portal opened in my space, if you want to call it that, where I was, because he was looking behind me, and that's where he went that way.
Okay. Now, you brought up hospice. This is interesting. By now, most people are familiar with the Netflix show Surviving Death. And one segment has to deal with people in hospice who have these visions of relatives, and often it's being attributed to the dream state, as you mentioned, the alpha state, the theta, or whatever the state applies. You've also mentioned you have near-death experiences. So do you suppose that's a near-death experience, your visitation of your stepfather, and in hospice, when people are ready to pass, where they begin having visions of their deceased relatives and friends that are there, I guess, to help them cross over? Do you suppose that they are related phenomena, or might it even be the same space?
Yes, I do. I do believe that's the same space. We go in and out of these spaces. Being a hypnotist, I know this throughout our day, all the time. And so moving into that space, and we can do that easily once we just know how and have the tools to be able to do that, because I do spirit rescue in that way. But yes, I would agree with that.
The descriptions of these experiences have certain things in common, a feeling of bliss, and especially in the near-death experience. And I'm not sure quite what they call it in hospice or in the hospital when that person is ready to cross over, but the feeling and the descriptions are very similar. But a lot of people seem to write off those experiences in the hospital setting as, oh, they're just dreaming. There's hundreds of thousands of cases, just like there is with near-death experiences. Now, you've had 2 near-death experiences, correct?
Correct.
And you've also had out-of-body experiences. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, my out-of-body experiences, they're conscious, and I actually induce them, and they're happening to this day. I actually teach how to have out-of-body experiences and astral travel and that type of thing. So it's a conscious thing. It did start after my father passed. My first near-death experience was when I was 9. And I didn't remember this near-death experience until I had my second one, which was a lot more profound and longer, I guess you could say, in terms of the experience in 2001. And when I was 9, I was going through trauma. A family member was abusing me. And at that time, he struck me so hard that I felt the intense pain, and I remembered every single bit of it during my second near-death experience. When I was processing, I popped out of my body and went through my head, and that intense pain was gone, and I felt this immense peace because I couldn't breathe, and it's really difficult to describe how it feels. I just remember what happened was I immediately was in the afterlife. I don't remember seeing my body or anything like that, which like I did in my near-death experience in 2001. But I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was a little girl. I didn't feel like I was a little girl anymore, but I was met by a light being who I recognized as Jesus, who I called Yeshua. And he was there actually, and he approached me. He came closer and he told me, he took me by the hand and he said, "You don't have to go back, my child." And whenever I talk about these, I feel that love. And he said, "You don't have to go back, my child. You've suffered enough." And I said, "But I want to go back because I haven't finished what I came here to do." He agreed with me. I knew in that 9-year-old mind what the deal was, type of thing. And so I came back to my body. And that's all I remember from that. And then the pain. In 2001, it was very different. I was with a bunch of friends in San Antonio, Texas, and we were inner tubing in the summertime down the Guadalupe River for a friend's birthday. We had a nice day tubing down the river, and we all got on the shuttle bus to take us back to our cars. And we were the last ones to get on the shuttle bus that holds maybe 13 people. And it was pulling a trailer that held our ice chests and our inner tubes, like one of those trailers for lawnmowers and stuff. I was the first one of our group to get on, and I saw it was full, and I hesitated, and they were like, "No, come on, you can stand." So I was the first one of our group on. I was up against the back door. And as he's driving, he's shifting through gears and he's pulling away from a light. And I don't really have anything to grip onto. The back door pops open and I fall out of the bus. And I land on the trailer hitch on my back. I remember every bump. I bounce off onto the road. I land on my back again, and then I bounce onto my side, and then the trailer runs over my head. And at that point is when I pop out of my body through my head again. And I remember screaming in my head, "Stop, you're killing me," at that point. And so I pop up and I'm floating. And this time I'm seeing what's going on. The first time I didn't pay attention. I remembered it afterwards. But I see the scene where my body is on the road and I see him finally stopping. People are jumping out. My friends jump out. And I'm watching them. And I remember thinking, I hope that bus doesn't run over my body because that would really mess it up.
Yes, it would.
Yes. And I'm thinking, I know that I've died. I know this. And I'm thinking, this is really going to mess up my friend's day. because we had such a really great day, and here I go and die on them. But I wasn't upset that I died. I was upset for them because it was going to be such a bummer. And then I'm thinking, my partner, oh, he'll be fine. He'll be fine afterwards. And then my sister and her family, I was thinking, oh, they'll be fine. And my friends will be fine. It'll be sad for a while. And then I thought about my mom, my stepdad. And I felt someone behind me, and he was there, maybe 20 feet from me or something, if you want to put it in space like that. He's telling me that I have to go back. And I remember the impression that my mom still needs me, and she did die a year and a half later, that type of thing. And we were really close, and we didn't live far from each other. And there was still stuff I needed to do. And then he turns, and I see what I call a portal of light. And there's people that I can see within the portal. And they're standing there, and I recognize them as my relatives in this life, and also my relatives or my kin in other lifetimes. People that I knew in other lifetimes, but I wouldn't have recognized here.
People from your current lifetime, seeing them must have been such a rush. You must think, this is like the coolest thing on earth. But what about the people from the other lifetimes? What was that like?
Well, there wasn't any communication. I just recognized them. I was just kind of floating and moving within them, and they're just kind of nodding, and they have like a smile, but it's not a real welcome home smile. It's just a smile, like they know who I am and I know who they are. And I'm moving through, but it wasn't this joyous thing like a homecoming that I've heard people talk about on the other side when they actually do die and come home. It's a big homecoming, a big party kind of thing. Off in the distance, I see a huge portal like the sun, golden white light, but it doesn't hurt my eyes to look at it. It's just beautiful. And a being moves out of it because there's really no walking. It's kind of floating maybe a little bit. And I recognize him again as Jesus. And
so this is the second time.
Whew, and I just fly to him. And I'm so happy to see him. And he embraces me. And I feel being in that embrace and in that light in his love is something that is indescribable. Everything that I had worried about myself or anything else in my life just disappears. His laughter, his eyes, everything about him just washes over you with so much love that you don't want for anything else. And he tells me telepathically that I do need to come back, that I didn't finish what I came here to do, because what I understood was he didn't tell me a lot of information about that, but I know now that we're going through a huge shift. I had to come this far. And I told him I don't want to go back. So we had that little conversation.
For those of us who have never experienced it, any description is not going to do it justice in our linear world. But that was a life-changing experience for you. And I can see how that has informed your practice. How did that experience change how you look at religion and what Jesus is really like and so forth?
Well, I've never been religious and was not a very good Catholic at all. Neither were my parents. I always felt that Jesus and the saints were out of reach for the common people. It was my understanding that in order to be able to talk to God or talk to any of those beings, had to be through the church, the priest or something like that. So I just didn't resonate with those teachings.
Like many of us, they did not resonate. I get it.
So I saw him in a much different light. I remembered him the way our relationship is. And everyone has their own different relationship with their masters and their teachers. Everyone, I believe, and I know this, they have their own relationship. It took a little while for me to remember all this because it was so profound. I had to heal. Ooh, man, I'm feeling it again. And I had to heal from the accident or the experience. And so it took a while. And my mother had to pass. And she ended up bringing him back to me as I was communicating with her. And then that's when the memories started flooding in, and he helped me remember everything. And so he's my main dude now, but not in a religious way.
I've heard it's not the way a lot of us were taught when we were kids, but that's probably a story for a different day, but it's a pretty amazing one. Nevertheless, your current practice, past life therapy, is becoming more and more popular. You also specialize in repressed ET contact and abduction memories, which I believe also ties into how you were also at one point saved by otherworldly beings. So which event came first? Was it being saved, or did that happen much later?
Well, no, that was happening as I was a child. And those memories didn't come to me until after my near-death experience and after my quickening, which I was going through after my near-death experience. My stepfather's passing opened up so many doors for me the three gray beings, I started remembering the experiences, the physicalness of the experiences. I was repressing so much, which is why I didn't remember a lot of my childhood. With the abuse, as these memories started coming, I could feel the pain in my body. I could smell the vomit, that kind of thing. And so in a lot of the experiences where I was being abused and hurt, these three gray beings would show up and they would remove me from the situation. So there were times that they took me on their ship and healed my body. Now that's a whole different story. But also whenever I connect with them, I feel this immense love from them. And I have a support group for people who have had experiences or think they may have had experiences but aren't sure as well. And I realize that people need somebody to talk to, maybe understand or just listen without rolling their eyes and think they're crazy, that kind of thing. So that's why I help people with that.
And speaking of your experiences and your practice, you also work with galactic beings, ascended master teachers. We know who that is. And the archangelic realm. Are they all in the same quantum world? Or can you help us understand the framework of these beings and where they exist and how they exist?
Wow. I can't answer all that. I just know I can tell the difference when a being is a higher vibrational master or teacher or archangel or galactic because of their frequency. So as people start working with their abilities, they're able to tell the difference between frequencies because we all have a frequency signature, just like a fingerprint. What I understand is that the ascended masters, when I was going through my healing and my quickening and working with the ascended teachers, I was working with the typical ones that people work with, like Saint Germain, and Paula Venetian was a big help to me, and Katumi was a huge help with my mediumship abilities. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and they're in my room. Katumi, I remember waking up and I'm on my side and there he is with the turban and everything and he's working on my chakras and in physical form as I am, or at least I was in that space between the physical and wherever he was where I could see him working on my chakras. So yes, I do work with them and they come forward for people if I do any channeling for them if they want that type of experience. But I also channel the whale and dolphin realms because Jesus or Yeshua took me to a water world during my near-death experience as well, where I have a Mer family there and remember another reality, like a parallel or a reality where I'm a Mer and a water being.
You mentioned Katumi. What kind of being was he?
Oh, he's an ascended master. He walked the planet. Normally, ascended masters have walked the planet in physical form, and they have worked on their spiritual progress to the point where they have ascended, where they don't feel the need or don't need to reincarnate to clear up their stuff anymore, because I feel we're basically here to clear up our stuff.
Yeah, lucky them, right?
Yeah. But they're still working with the planet.
Right. It's like a master teacher that
yes.
doesn't have to go to school anymore, but feels compelled that I can help someone. So
yes, I understand that they're still learning too in the realms, in the higher frequencies where they are. We never stop growing and learning. Just because we've ascended from the earth plane doesn't mean that they aren't working on their stuff. They just are able, like you said, they're just master teachers like master teachers are here.
How available are they to the common man?
Very available. They want us to call on them.
Now, if we call on them, spirit guides, angels, light beings, how do we know they're actually getting that connection or they're actually listening?
I always say trust your intuition. You can ask for signs. The biggest problem with Western society is trust, right? Trusting what we're getting because we're so used to only relying on our physical senses. As we work with them and work with our own spirit guides, because we have our own guides, our own teachers, we start to learn to trust little things because the communications can be subtle. It could be repeating numbers. It could be dream time is the best way for them to communicate with us, and meditation. I can't stress how important some kind of reflection or meditation is for communicating and connecting. And that's how I was able to communicate with everyone is through ongoing meditation. I made a commitment to my guide, to Jesus, Yeshua, and everyone I was working with to be in my room every night at 9:00 and meditate or be in that space where they could communicate with me. And my room was a classroom. And so I could see them with my third eye in my room and teaching me all kinds of things. And that's a whole book there.
It's something that a lot of us can benefit from. You mentioned the quickening process. What exactly is that?
Quickening process. A lot of people are going through that, and I've come across quite a few people in my clientele that are having these experiences. They just open up their chakras, or their crown chakras open up so wide that they're seeing things through the veil, I guess you could say. Things are happening around them that they don't understand. And that's what happened to me. I had a lot of things going on at the same time, where my near-death experience, my mother passing, I went to the Monroe Institute, did a week-long program. I was going through a breakup. So there was a lot going on in 1 year. I was meditating heavily. I was fasting. I was following all their instructions on what to do. Now, I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, but I wouldn't change it for the world because it's what I needed. All of my past life traumas came to the surface for me to clear. And Yeshua, Jesus, is the one who taught me about past life soul retrieval. Okay, that type of thing, clearing our karmic programs. From Atlantis, one night I was laying in bed and I had all of these lifetimes shown to me, from leaving source to being an amoeba, a elemental, a fairy, all of this. It was this cycle of lifetimes.
Did you say a fairy?
A fairy.
Wow. It sounds like something from Irish folklore. It seems like many of those stories originate in England and Ireland for some reason. You're saying that Jesus, or Yeshua, as you call him, actually taught you about past lives.
Yeah, and it wasn't a actual thought process. It was something that just started happening, I guess you could say. I was working with some spiritual groups online, trying to help me understand and support those on the group as well, and share experiences so that people could learn from each other. We'd give impressions on what we were getting from the other people. So I guess you could say do readings on the groups. And that's when it started to develop for me. And also communicating with spirit guides and angels and things like that is also a form of mediumship. You're still communicating with other beings. So it just started happening, and then I felt the need, and we all have our calling, right, Johnny, where we feel the need to be doing what we're here for, what our plan calls out for. So I started in San Antonio, and then I ended up moving back home to Oregon. It's been about 15 years now, I guess. So then my practice grew and grew and grew. And as spirit will help us, I was let go of a 12-year job, a corporate job. So that gave me the chance to do this full time. So I realized that after a few minutes. It was the universe answering my call, I guess.
It sure sounds like it. Now, we talk about mediumship to help people understand how important it is and why, especially, it's happening a lot more now these days. What are some examples of evidential mediumship that you've seen in your practice?
Normally, I don't remember readings because I can't keep all that in my head. It's way too much. But things like that do stand out once in a while. It's nice to have confirmation for the reader as well as, of course, for the client, because that's what it's all about. In the beginning, I used to be so scared. What if I can't give them what they want and they think I'm a fraud or whatever, which I know I'm not. But then Yeshua or Jesus would tell me, it's not about you. It's about the client, and it's about spirit. So some examples, I remember one gal, she came to me and we were communicating with her dad who had passed. And he showed me her holding what looked like a card, like a playing card kind of thing. And he told her that it was her lucky day. That came through and that he was there. She just started crying. She goes, oh my gosh, that was a lottery ticket. And I won, I don't remember how much it was, but it was a little bit of money for her. And she felt that he helped her with that because she needed money. So I thought that was really cool. And she enjoyed that communication. A grandmother came to me who had lost her grandson, very sad young boy. When he came in and I connected with him, he was bouncing a basketball. And she told me that he passed away while he was playing in a basketball tournament. He loved basketball. So he was still playing basketball on the other side, and he wanted her to know that. That was very profound. Recently, a gal wanted to communicate with her mother. So her mother came through and was showing me that the gal was with her and her little girl, her daughter, in a field of yellow flowers, and that they had just gone to a sunflower festival because the sunflowers were her mother's favorite flower. So things like that, which wouldn't mean anything to anyone except for that person. I always tell, because I teach classes on psychic development and mediumship, that just give what you get, because you may not understand it, but some little thing can make sense to the client for sure.
So the validation really comes from the client because, like you just said, you don't know what the yellow flowers are for, but they make the connection. It seems to be there's a wave of mediums and psychics that are kind of cropping up all over the place. Why do you suppose that's happening now?
Well, I'm glad because I think it's because the veil is thinning and people need this type of communication. My goal is to help people remember that we don't die. We're so afraid of death, especially with what's going on in the world, and we're being programmed to be so afraid of death. We don't die. We just change form. I think mediumship goes a long way toward helping people understand that and remember that, because we've all done this many times. We've all died many times and changed form and have gone home. I just see this as a job. And when I'm finished with this job, I'll go home, like on the other side of the universe or whatever. Yeah, I think the veil is thinning and we need more people that are opening up to their abilities. So I'm glad to see it.
Obviously, there's fraud that a lot of people are afraid of, but I do believe once they go to a reading and they get the validation, that's going to answer their questions anyway.
Some people are so skeptical that it doesn't matter what you tell them, and maybe they're going to a medium because someone wants them to, or they're grieving so bad they just want some kind of information, something like that. But I always tell people to come with an open mind, because if you have expectations, then you might get disappointed, because I never know, and Spirit always knows what's best for you in that communication as well. Any medium you go to, go with an open mind, because that makes it easier on the medium, and it also makes it easier on Spirit, on the people that you want to communicate with.
Okay. I've heard the same thing. That's usually the best advice for somebody that's going into a reading. Now, you apparently have experiences helping souls into the light, which sounds a lot like what we were talking about earlier about people in hospice. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, that started about 8 or 9 years ago, I guess. I wanted to do EVPs, which are electronic voice phenomenon, on a digital recorder. And I wanted to hear my parents, because I had heard some EVP and I thought it was amazing. I'm also a paranormal researcher and investigator now as well. And so I started doing EVPs and spirit box type of recordings. And as I was doing that, I was hearing voices saying, help me, those types of things. I thought, oh my gosh, I got the information from my guides, because every time I can't understand something, I ask my guidance. And that's what we need to do, is ask our guidance to give us information before we trust what anybody else is going to tell us. I found Huff Paranormal on YouTube, which is amazing stuff. And he talked about rescuing people he builds these amazing spirit boxes, and he has a way to communicate with them that's amazing. He did a spirit rescue on Johnny Cash, which just blew me away. And I cried and cried as I was listening to it. And I realized these people need help. And this is something Yeshua taught me, which is very similar to a past life soul retrieval. And so just helping people whose attention is still on the earth plane for whatever reason. They may have died tragically and don't understand that they've died, maybe don't know they died, and they're still going through the same routine every day, or they're attached to something. Sometimes people get attached to property, to people, to alcohol and drugs, any addictions. And there's a lot of people for fear of judgment because of religion and that type of thing. So I found a lot of that too. And anger and emotions that we're really stuck on can keep someone stuck. And we haven't been taught how to die.
A very good point. Now, I was going to ask you about the soul retrieval and how the soul rescue seemed very similar. During a reading, does that mean that you can perform a soul rescue, or is that a different process?
Yes, that's happened a few times. It doesn't happen that often. It's kind of rare for someone to be stuck on the earth plane for a long period of time. Some mediums won't work with earthbound spirits. I do. So I don't see anything wrong with earthbound spirits. They're just confused. And if they're angry, they don't want to listen to anything, then I'll just move on. But yes, that can happen.
I read this in your bio. The astral plane upholds or protects the illusion that a soul must return to the earth plane again and again. What exactly does that mean?
So it's my understanding that we tend to only go as high as our spiritual progress will let us, will allow us in frequency. We have been programmed, is my understanding, to believe that once we are in the astral plane, the higher astral plane, which everything's hunky-dory, we're with our family, and we don't have any pain, things like that. We're still living what we can call a physical life because we still feel physical. It's beautiful and things like that, but it's not our real home. So we tend to think that that's heaven, because it's so much better than here, but it's not our real home. So we can be under the illusion that this is all there is. And so we choose to keep coming back. We don't have to come back, but it's easier to work on our stuff here, but we don't need to. We have the ability here to be able to move much higher in frequency and actually reach our highest level, our higher self in that state of very high frequency in God's heart. It's a lot easier to lower your frequency and move down than it is to raise your frequency. That takes work. And lowering your frequency is something that we have been programmed to believe that if we're punished, we've done something wrong. And a lot of religions teach that, or a lot of philosophies teach that. We came back and had a hard time because we must have been punished for something we did in another lifetime, when I don't believe that's true.
Practical advice to raise your vibe, raise your frequency. What would be some simple bullet points?
Well, number one is know that we are love. That's what we are. We embody love. We embody God's light, God's love. That's who we are. We're experiencing God through our bodies. God is experiencing through us. God's source, whatever you want to call it. And so that, I believe, will help with fighting fear, because the ego always has something to be afraid of. The ego always has something to be afraid of. But living in fear lowers our frequency. And just being kind to each other, being love, because that's what we're here for. I believe that we need time for reflection in our day, disconnect from the illusion, our projections, because we're projecting all this. The Matrix was a documentary. And I will say that what proved this to me was I was in a grocery store, H-E-B, in San Antonio, Texas, when I was waking up, and everything disappeared. The store, everything disappeared, and I saw the grid, the Matrix. With my physical eyes, I saw it. And it was for about 2 to 3 seconds, which is quite a while if you think about it. I saw the blue-green lines, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm projecting all this. It was just like on the holodeck, except it was more blue. But we're projecting all this, and that made me realize that we are creating our reality. So we can create what we want. We just have to remember that we are love, and to get rid of our stuff, clear our pain, the traumas. We need to go inside and reflect and work on the stuff that we've been hiding and repressing all these lifetimes.
Sharon, thanks for joining us today and sharing your experiences. Very, very cool stuff. How can our listeners learn more about you online?
Well, my website is SharonSananda.com. You can find me there. My email is SharonSananda@gmail.com.
Excellent. I will put your website in the show notes as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.